Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel where we dive deep into the stories shaping our world. Today we're talking about a massive political earthquake rocking South Africa in 2025. South Africa is currently experiencing one of the most dramatic political upheavals in its modern history, a moment that has sent shockwaves through every layer of society and government. The 2025 High Court ruling against President Cyril Ramaphosa has not only thrown his leadership into question but has also ignited a firestorm within the African National Congress, ANC, the party that has governed the country since the end of apartheid. This development is more than just another headline, it is a pivotal event that could redefine South Africa's political and economic future. The court's decision, which declared that Ramaphosa breached key parts of the constitution and undermined the rule of law, has left the president fighting for his political life while his party descends into chaos. The judgment is being described as the most severe condemnation of a sitting president since South Africa's transition to democracy in 1994, and it has sparked national outrage, intense political infighting, and uncertainty about what comes next. At the heart of this crisis lies the infamous Fela farm scandal, which has haunted Ramaphosa for years. The controversy began when it was revealed that large sums of foreign currency, reportedly millions of dollars, had been hidden in furniture at his private game farm. When some of this money was stolen, questions began to swirl: why was the cash there, why wasn't it declared, and did the president attempt to conceal the theft? The court's ruling was unambiguous in its condemnation, accusing Ramaphosa of breaching the Executive Ethics Code, abusing state resources, and obstructing justice by interfering with law enforcement investigations. The judges described his actions as misleading and deceptive, asserting that he had embarrassed the office of the presidency and eroded public trust in constitutional governance. Perhaps the most striking statement from the ruling was the reminder that no one is above the Constitution, a declaration that resonated deeply with a population weary of corruption and political double-dealing. The judgment did not impose a criminal conviction but instead referred the matter to Parliament and the National Prosecuting Authority, NPA, opening the door to impeachment or even criminal prosecution. This move set off a political earthquake within the ANC. The party, once revered as the champion of South Africa's liberation under Nelson Mandela, has been struggling for years to maintain its moral and political authority amid endless corruption scandals, economic stagnation, and internal factional warfare. In the aftermath of the ruling, the ANC's National Executive Committee, NEC, convened an emergency meeting that quickly descended into chaos. Reports from inside the room described shouting matches, walkouts, and deep divisions between rival factions. Reformist members aligned with Ramaphosa clashed with the party's old guard, while panic spread as leaders realized the gravity of their predicament. Several senior figures called for Ramaphosa's immediate resignation, arguing that the party could not afford to defend him without destroying what little credibility it had left. Others pleaded for calm, insisting that removing the president could fracture the ANC beyond repair. Even the party's traditionally loyal wings, such as the Youth League and Women's League, were split down the middle. The Youth League called for a special national conference to elect new leadership, saying the ANC needed a fresh start. The Women's League, long considered one of Ramaphosa's support bases, found itself bitterly divided between those defending him and those demanding accountability. The ANC's Secretary-General, Fico Mbalula, admitted during a tense press briefing that the party was facing a historic crisis, though his attempt to project calm only underscored the sense of confusion. Within days, 3 high-ranking ANC leaders resigned in protest, citing frustration with what they called the party's paralysis and moral decay. What was once Africa's oldest and most dominant liberation movement now appeared to be tearing itself apart in real time. Outside the halls of power, ordinary South Africans reacted with fury and exhaustion. Social media erupted with hashtags like #RamaphosaMustGo and #SAingCrisis, as citizens vented their frustration over years of unfulfilled promises. Protests began spreading across major cities and provinces, with demonstrators demanding Ramaphosa's resignation, new elections, and an end to what they called elite impunity. For many, the court ruling symbolized the final straw in a long series of betrayals. South Africa remains one of the most unequal countries in the world, with over 60% of its population living in poverty and unemployment hovering around 33%, nearly double that for the youth. Chronic power outages, water shortages, and failing infrastructure have become daily realities. Ramaphosa's rise to power in 2018 was supposed to mark a clean break from the corruption of his predecessor, Jacob Zuma, whose estate capture scandals had drained billions from the economy. Yet 7 years later, many South Africans see Ramaphosa as part of the same political rot he once vowed to eliminate. The question on everyone's mind is what comes next and who, if anyone, can fill the leadership vacuum. The ANC lacks a clear successor. Deputy President Paul Moshatile has been floated as a possible replacement, but his ties to internal party factions and limited national appeal make him an uncertain choice. Meanwhile, a new generation of South Africans, often called the born frees, those born after apartheid, are demanding a new kind of politics rooted in transparency, accountability, and results. This generational shift is already reshaping the political landscape, fueling both disillusionment with the ANC and growing support for opposition movements. The opposition parties, sensing an opportunity, have united in an unusually coordinated response. The Democratic Alliance, DA, led by John Steenhuisen, called for Ramaphosa's resignation by sunset, warning that failure to do so would lead to nationwide demonstrations. The Economic Freedom Fighters, EFF, under Julius Malema, were even more scathing, declaring that Ramaphosa is not the solution, he is the problem. Smaller parties like Action SA joined the chorus, emphasizing the need for clean governance and new leadership. What's striking is how these ideologically diverse parties, ranging from the pro-business DA to the radical socialist EFF, momentarily found common ground in their demand for Ramaphosa's removal. While such unity is rare and likely temporary, it underscores how far the president's standing has fallen and how vulnerable the ANC has become. This crisis also threatens to unravel the fragile government of national unity, GNU, formed after the 2024 elections. For the first time since the end of apartheid, the ANC lost its parliamentary majority, forcing it into a coalition with the DA and smaller parties to stay in power. The GNU was meant to bring stability and bipartisanship, but ideological differences between the ANC's left-leaning policies and the DA's market-oriented agenda quickly produced tension. The fallout from the court ruling could be the final blow. If the DA withdraws from the coalition, the government could collapse, triggering a constitutional crisis. Since South Africa's electoral system doesn't allow for snap elections before 2029, the country would be forced to cobble together a new coalition, no easy task given the current animosity between parties. Some speculate that the ANC might turn to the EFF or Jacob Zuma's new Umkhonto weSizwe, MK, party for support, but such alliances would alarm investors and the business community. Both the EFF and MK advocate for radical economic reforms, including land expropriation without compensation and the nationalization of major industries, policies that could devastate investor confidence and tank the already fragile economy. The economic implications of this political turmoil are severe. South Africa's economy has been stagnant for years, with growth stuck below 1% and inflation eroding household purchasing power. The rand, already volatile, is expected to fall further as investors flee uncertainty. Analysts warn that a collapse of the GNU or a shift toward populist economic policies could trigger capital flight, raise import prices, and deepen the cost of living crisis. Businesses that had hoped Ramaphosa's administration would usher in reform and stability now face renewed anxiety. The DA's push for fiscal restraint clashes with the ANC's emphasis on social spending, particularly welfare programs that sustain millions of impoverished citizens. Without consensus, the government may struggle to pass a budget, potentially leading to a shutdown scenario reminiscent of crises seen in the United States. Within Parliament, Ramaphosa's immediate challenge is survival. Impeachment proceedings require a two-thirds majority, 267 votes out of 400 in the National Assembly. The ANC holds 159 seats, while the DA controls 87. Together with the EFF, MK, and smaller opposition parties, the numbers could align against him if his opponents find common cause. However, such unity is far from guaranteed. The DA and EFF have little in common ideologically and often refuse to cooperate. Still, the pressure on Ramaphosa is mounting, both from within his party and from the public. Calls for his resignation are growing louder, and some insiders believe stepping down voluntarily might spare the ANC a total collapse. Yet resignation would plunge the party into a leadership crisis, with no consensus candidate to take the reins. Meanwhile, the National Prosecuting Authority's decision on whether to pursue criminal charges could determine Ramaphosa's fate. If formal charges are filed, it would mark the first time in history that a sitting South African president faces criminal prosecution. Even if he escapes legal jeopardy, the political damage is irreversible. The image of Ramaphosa as the clean-up president, the reformer who promised to restore integrity to government, has been shattered. For many citizens, this marks the end of an era, the final unraveling of the ANC's moral authority. Beyond politics, this crisis poses a profound question about South Africa's democratic resilience. The protests, the social media uproar, and the rising disillusionment among young voters all point to a society demanding change. The born-free generation, unburdened by the historical loyalty that tied older voters to the ANC, is calling for a complete overhaul of the political system. Whether that change comes through opposition victories, new parties, or a grassroots movement remains to be seen. The Democratic Alliance is polling neck and neck with the ANC in some surveys, while the EFF and MK are gaining traction in poorer regions frustrated by years of neglect. Smaller parties like Action SA may emerge as keymakers in future coalitions, shaping the balance of power in unexpected ways. However, South Africa's history warns that transitions are rarely peaceful. The 2021 riots following Jacob Zuma's arrest left more than 300 people dead and caused billions in damage. With public anger once again reaching a boiling point, there are fears that widespread protests could spiral into violence. If the GNU collapses and political instability deepens, it could paralyze government functions and worsen the humanitarian crisis already gripping the nation. The rest of the world is watching closely, not just because South Africa is a regional powerhouse but because its democratic institutions have long been viewed as a model for the continent. Since Nelson Mandela's presidency in 1994, South Africa has symbolized the possibility of transformation from oppression to democracy. If its institutions falter now, it sends a troubling signal to other nations battling corruption and inequality. South Africa's economy, moreover, is deeply intertwined with that of its neighbors. A collapse in investor confidence or a sharp depreciation of the rand could ripple across southern Africa, affecting trade and financial stability in countries like Botswana, Namibia, and Zimbabwe. The global implications are also significant. South Africa is a key supplier of minerals, including platinum and gold, essential to international markets. A prolonged political crisis could disrupt these exports, adding to global economic uncertainty. As the nation stands at this crossroads, several developments will be crucial to watch in the coming weeks. The first is whether Ramaphosa chooses to resign or face impeachment. The second is how the ANC's internal factions respond, whether they rally behind new leadership or continue their descent into division. The roles of the youth and women's leagues will be pivotal, as they represent grassroots sentiment within the party. Third, the scale and nature of public protests will reveal how much pressure civil society can exert on the political elite. And finally, the stability of the GNU and the broader economy will determine whether South Africa can weather this storm or slide deeper into crisis. Ultimately, The 2025 High Court ruling has exposed the fragility not only of Ramaphosa's presidency but of the entire post-apartheid political order. The ANC faces an existential reckoning, and the country must decide whether to reform from within or chart a new path altogether. One thing is undeniable: the age of political impunity in South Africa is ending. The people are demanding transparency, justice, and change, and while the road ahead may be turbulent, this moment could mark the beginning of a new chapter in the nation's democratic journey.